The triple secret. He returned for his daughters. Wait. Before the shocking discovery, smash that subscribe button, give this video a like, and quickly comment below. Do you think some secrets are ever justified? Did Olivia have the right to keep his children from him? This is a powerful true-life story about a self-made billionaire, a hidden family, and the slow, painful process of earning back the right to love. Part 1. The shocking revelation. The impossible encounter. The last thing Gabriel Sterling expected as he sat alone in the lobby of his Miami hotel was to be approached by 3 identical, blonde, wide-eyed little girls holding a silver heart necklace he hadn't seen in 6 years. One look was enough for everything he had buried to rush back with full force. He had given that necklace to the only woman he had ever loved, the one who had vanished without a trace. And now, standing before him, were 3 impossible reminders that perhaps she hadn't left alone. Gabriel Sterling didn't believe in fate. His life was built on structure, precision, and strategy. He planned everything, from his meals to his global mergers, weeks in advance. So, when his schedule was unexpectedly altered this morning, when his flight to London was delayed and he was rerouted to a suite in his own downtown Miami hotel, he viewed it as nothing more than a logistical inconvenience. He didn't yet know that this small interruption would be the start of everything he thought he had lost finding its way back to him. The lobby was quiet for a weekday morning, mostly filled with a few early check-ins and the hotel staff preparing for a corporate event. Gabriel was sitting alone in one of the private lounge areas, coffee in hand, phone on the table but untouched. He was looking out the window, not thinking of anything in particular, which was rare for him. Something about the silence settled over him differently today. Not heavy, not light, just unfamiliar. He didn't see them approach until they were right in front of him. 3 little blonde girls, about 6 years old, standing side by side like a small army, hands clasped, with coinciding expressions of nervousness and curiosity. They wore their hair in identical braids, and their eyes, a soft shade of hazel, large and deeply familiar, fixed on him with a calm intensity. "Excuse me," the middle one said, her voice careful but firm. "Did you happen to see a necklace like this?" She held up a small silver heart hanging on a delicate chain, the kind of item any child might own. But this one stopped Gabriel abruptly. He knew it. He knew it better than anything he possessed. It was the necklace he had given Amelia Hayes for her birthday, 6.5 years ago. He had spent weeks choosing it, engraving a single letter, an A, on the back. It was simple, discreet, and full of meaning. She had worn it every day until the day she disappeared. He stared at the necklace, then at the girl holding it, and felt a strange, slow crumbling begin in his chest. "Where did you get that?" His voice was lower than he intended. "It's our mommy's," the second girl quickly replied. "She said it was from someone special, but we never met him." Gabriel's pulse began to race, but he kept his expression steady. "What is your mother's name?" The 3 girls looked at each other before answering. The third, who hadn't spoken yet, said the name so softly it almost vanished in the air between them. "Amelia." And then everything around him disappeared. The ambient noise, the soft hotel music, the barista announcing orders. It all dissolved under the weight of that single name. His chest tightened. Amelia Hayes, the woman who had once been his everything, the woman who had vanished from his life 6 years ago, without explanation, without warning, without goodbye. He had searched, called, sent people, investigated. She had completely disappeared. Now, here were 3 small girls, each a mirror of the other, and most unsettlingly, a mirror of him. Blonde hair that must have come from her, but there was something in the shape of their mouths, their eyebrows, the curve of their cheekbones that he couldn't ignore. And those eyes, those large, searching eyes, were hers in color. But something in the gaze was his. He tried to breathe evenly. "Is your mother here now?" "She's checking in," the first girl said. "We came to sit while she talks to the lady at the counter." He stood up slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what he was dealing with, didn't know if he was ready, but he knew one thing. He had to see her. Because if this was real, if these girls were who he already feared they were, then everything he thought he had buried had just returned to his life. Part 2. The lobby confrontation. Gabriel didn't move immediately. His legs were tense, his hands slightly curled at his sides, as if his whole body was trying to stay still while his heart raced ahead. The girls returned to their seats now, giggling softly and looking at the necklace as if it held a secret they didn't fully understand. He watched them with a strange mix of awe and dread, unsure which emotion would win out. He felt like he was on the edge of a cliff, with no idea how far the fall would be or what awaited him at the bottom. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Sahara, Amelia appeared near the reception desk, a small suitcase trailing behind her and a worn messenger bag slung over her shoulder. Her hair was longer now, pulled into a loose braid, darker than he remembered, but still unmistakably hers. Her posture was guarded, yet calm. She leaned slightly as she spoke to the receptionist, her expression warm and tired at the same time. When she turned and saw the girls across the lounge, she smiled, and then she saw him. For a second, her entire body froze. The color drained from her face, and her hand instinctively gripped the strap of her bag tighter. Her eyes met his, large and filled with something between shock and guilt. She didn't move toward him. She didn't look away either. It was as if time had immobilized them both. "Amelia," he said, and even hearing himself pronounce her name again felt unreal. "Gabe, I thought you were—" Her voice was barely a whisper. He stopped. The truth was, he didn't know what he thought. Lost? She had been gone forever. He had mourned her as if she were dead, but now she stood before him. Alive, real, unchanged in the ways that mattered, and completely different in the ways that hurt. She glanced at the girls briefly, then back to him. Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." His eyes darted to the girls and back to her. "They're mine, aren't they?" There was no point in pretending. She didn't try to lie. She just nodded slowly. Yes, that single word hit him like a punch to the chest. The world didn't spin or collapse, but something inside him shattered. It wasn't rage he felt, not even betrayal. It was grief, for the time he had lost, for the moments he would never recover, for the birthdays, the first steps, the questions he hadn't been there to answer. "Why?" he asked, lower now. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at the floor before meeting his gaze again. "Because I was afraid. Because I thought I was doing the right thing." She took a visible breath. "Because, in that moment, I didn't think you would choose us over your career, and I couldn't bear the idea of being someone's complication." "You weren't a complication," he said sharply, the words rushing out. "You were everything. God, Amelia, I would have done anything if I had known." She closed her eyes briefly, as if the weight of that truth was too much to bear. "I know that now, but back then, I convinced myself otherwise. And after they were born, after I built something stable, I didn't know how to turn back." He took another step closer, not threateningly, just broken. "You don't just disappear and take my children with you. You don't get to make that decision alone." "I know," she said again, softer now. "And I'm sorry. I truly am." There was silence between them then, not because there was nothing to say, but because too much had already been said in just a few words. One of the girls called out, "Mommy, who is that?" Amelia turned and forced a smile. "Just a friend, honey." Gabriel didn't correct her. Not yet? His voice was too husky. His heart was still trying to catch up with him, but looking at those 3 small girls, 3 miniature versions of himself, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. What would you do? Would you forgive Amelia, or would the pain of the lost years be too much? Comment your honest reaction below. Part 3. Building the Now. Later that night, Gabriel sat alone in his hotel suite, the city lights glittering beyond the glass behind him. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of distant traffic. Yet his mind was anything but quiet. The conversation with Amelia replayed on a loop, each word resonating louder than the last. 3 daughters, 3 little lives he didn't know existed. How could he have lost so much? He had spent those years building hotels in multiple countries, speaking on global stages, dining with industry leaders. Yet he hadn't known that 3 versions of himself were learning to walk, to talk, growing up without him. It made everything he had achieved feel hollow, beautiful, polished, but empty. He thought of the way one of the girls tucked her hair behind her ear, a gesture he knew he made himself. The way another narrowed her eyes when concentrating on something, just as he always did when reading fine print. They weren't coincidences. They were blood. They were his. He barely slept that night. In the morning, he made a decision. He wasn't going to disappear again, nor was he going to chase them blindly. But he needed to see them again, to understand what he had missed, to understand who they were, who she had become. Within days, Gabriel tracked down Amelia. It wasn't hard. He still had the contacts, the resources. She was living in a small town in Vermont, just as she had said years ago she always wanted. A quiet place, with trees, space. A place where the world didn't seem to be constantly demanding more. She had started her own business, a modest but growing publishing house for female writers. He read every article he could find. The company wasn't flashy, but it was thoughtful, respected, built with care. Just like her, he drove there without telling anyone. No private jet, no staff, no schedule. Just him and the road. He didn't know what he expected to find. Maybe some small part of him hoped she would see him, soften, let him explain. But when he arrived at the local elementary school just before dismissal and saw her standing outside with the girls, his illusions vanished. Amelia was radiant in a way he didn't remember, not from makeup or posture, but from presence. She stood with her arms crossed, watching the school doors, her hair slightly messy from the wind, a messenger bag hanging from her shoulder. She looked like a woman who knew exactly who she was. The girls burst through the gates moments later, running to her with wide smiles. She crouched down, opened her arms, and let them run into her. Gabriel couldn't breathe. They looked so happy, untouched by the world he lived in. Ava was the first to speak, holding up a drawing with messy stick figures and what looked like a dog on a rainbow. June chattered at the same time, tugging on Amelia's sleeve, asking something about piano lessons. Amelia smiled, nodded, and responded with ease. It was a rhythm, one he had no part in. He stayed in the car that day, and the next. For a week, he parked across the street in various spots, just watching. Sometimes at the school, sometimes outside the small office where Amelia worked. Once he followed her to a bakery where the girls were choosing cookies, and Amelia let each of them pick 2 instead of 1. They sat at a table near the window, laughing, sharing bites. He felt ashamed of himself, lurking like a stranger, a voyeur in the life he had abandoned. But he couldn't stop. He was trying to understand, not just who they were, but how she survived, how she did what he had called impossible. Then, one afternoon, she heard. It was raining lightly. The girls were already inside. Amelia had gone back out to grab a bag from the trunk. She turned, paused, and looked directly at his parked car. His eyes met hers through the windshield. She didn't flinch, didn't smile. She stared for a long, steady moment. Then, she closed the trunk and went back inside. The next morning, Gabriel found a letter in the mail slot of the rented house he was using on the outskirts of town. It was handwritten, with no return address. One page. You don't get to watch from afar anymore. If you want to be here, do it right. You don't get the easy entry. You earn it. I won't stop you from trying. But I won't let you hurt them again. Gabriel folded the paper and held it for a long time. She hadn't slammed the door. She hadn't called the police. She hadn't told him to disappear. But she had drawn a line, not around herself, but around the girls. He didn't want the easy entry. He hadn't come to take over. He had come because regret was louder than his pride. And now, for the first time in his life, Gabriel Sterling was ready to prove himself, not with power, not with money, but with presence. Calm, patient, persistent. He had broken something once. Now he would try to rebuild it, one careful step at a time. Part 4. The Shared Present. Gabriel Sterling never imagined that starting over would be so quiet. There were no dramatic confrontations, no emotional monologues, no grand gestures, just long days, awkward silences, and the slow, painful work of trying to earn the right to be a part of someone's life, especially the lives of two girls who didn't know who he really was. He had always been a man of action, results, numbers. But nothing he had done before prepared him for the slow, invisible labor of earning entry into someone's life. He started small, exactly as Amelia's note had challenged him to do. He didn't try to talk to the girls immediately, didn't show up at their door or office. He did his research and figured out where he could start without crossing boundaries. First, he offered anonymous support, funding school supplies for their class, donating to the local community center that hosted music workshops for June, fixing the broken basketball hoop in the schoolyard that Ava and her friends loved. No one knew the money was his, except the administrators, and he never asked for recognition. That wasn't the point. The point was to help where he could and start fixing a part of himself in the process. But even from a distance, he wanted to be near. He walked the neighborhood, sometimes deliberately, sometimes just to clear his head. He learned the town's sounds, the church bell at noon, the children's laughter at recess, the subtle way the wind moved through the trees near the school gates. These details, once meaningless in his old life, became sacred. They belonged to the world Amelia had built, and he was a guest at its edges. He saw Amelia occasionally during those weeks, once at the post office, another time at the park. She didn't ignore him, but she didn't invite him in either. Her eyes held something he had never seen in anyone before: measured openness. She wasn't welcoming him, but she was watching, waiting, testing his patience perhaps, or simply guarding her peace. And he understood. He had burned every bridge between them. She had every right to keep the match in her hand. One rainy Tuesday, fate intervened. Gabriel had just emerged from a small bookstore with a bag of donated books he planned to leave at the school library. He saw Amelia standing under an awning across the street, her umbrella broken, water soaking her sleeves. Without thinking, he crossed the street and offered her his. She accepted without saying a word. For a moment, she looked at him as if searching for a lie. But all she saw was a man who wasn't trying to impress her anymore, just someone holding an umbrella. She gave him a subtle nod, and together, they walked toward the school in silence. That moment opened a small door. Amelia didn't slam it shut. Days later, she texted him via the school's communication app, forwarding him the schedule for Ava and June's school play. No comment, no invitation, just information. Gabriel stared at the screen for almost an hour before responding with a simple, "Thank you." He went to the play. He sat in the last row. He didn't approach. He just watched. The girls were dressed as talking trees. Both had lines. Both delivered them with wide smiles and nervous energy. Amelia sat 2 rows ahead, applauding and laughing. Gabriel didn't take his eyes off them. He had missed so many moments like this, but for the first time, he was present. And that mattered. In the following weeks, things shifted subtly. He started running into Amelia more often, at the grocery store, at school events outside the library. Sometimes, she nodded. Sometimes, she asked for help carrying something. Once, she handed him Ava's forgotten lunchbox, without explanation, as if she had simply decided he could be trusted with it. It wasn't affection. It was something rarer, a reconstruction of faith. Then came the day that changed everything. Amelia called him. It was late at night, the sky already dark with approaching night colors. She sounded exhausted. "Can you pick them up from school tomorrow? I have a meeting. I'll text you the details." That was it. No fuss. No lengthy explanations. Just trust, carefully placed in his hands, like an unspoken, fragile gift. The next day, he arrived early. He stood awkwardly near the school steps, unsure if the girls would even recognize him. When they came out, Ava saw him first. She frowned, tilted her head, and then turned to June with a whisper. June looked at him, then her eyes widened. "You're the tree guy from the play?" she asked boldly. Gabriel crouched down to their level. "Yes, that's me." "Why are you picking us up?" Ava asked. "Not Rudy," he corrected. "Just curious." "Your mom had a meeting. She asked me to help." They looked at each other. June shrugged. Ava crossed her arms. "Do you have snacks?" Gabriel smiled. "I do now," he said, pulling 2 granola bars from his pocket. They took the snacks, started walking beside him. Not holding hands, not chattering yet, but not running away either. That evening, when he dropped them off, Amelia opened the door with a questioning look. Ava walked past her and said, "He had snacks. He's not bad." June followed with a smile and a nod. Amelia raised an eyebrow at him. "Granola bars," he explained. A short, almost involuntary laugh escaped her lips. But it was real. Part fluff, the unveiling. From that day on, Gabriel became part of their routine. Not every day, not forcibly, but with consistency. He helped on school field trips. He delivered forgotten homework. He took Ava to a robotics event when Amelia had a deadline. He sat at June's piano recitals, applauding with genuine pride. He never referred to himself as their father. He let them decide who he was. He was simply there, showing up, over and over again. And gradually, the girls began to open up. Ava started asking him for help with science homework. June liked to quiz him on song lyrics. One night, after a particularly bad storm, the girls showed up at his rental house with Amelia, all 3 drenched. No electricity. He made them hot cocoa, gave them dry clothes, and they stayed the night. Nothing dramatic, just warmth. Companionship. In those moments, Gabriel didn't think about the billions he had earned or the empire he had built. He only thought about how good it felt to see June fall asleep with her head on his arm, and how Ava laughed in her sleep when he tucked her in. He had run away from the chance to be a father. Now, every silent moment with them was a step toward becoming one. Part 6. The Ask. It was a Sunday morning when Amelia decided it was time. The sun had just begun to stream light through the kitchen window, warming the floor in soft golden stripes, and the smell of cinnamon pancakes filled the air. Ava and June were sitting at the table, still in their pajamas, arguing about whose turn it was to choose the breakfast music. Amelia stood by the counter, watching them, stirring the batter slower than usual, her mind miles away. It wasn't a sudden realization, not truly. The decision had been forming inside her for weeks, perhaps months, one quiet moment at a time. The way the girls looked at Gabriel now, with ease instead of caution. The way he had learned to tie June's shoelaces, perfectly, because she was particular about her bows. The way Ava called him GS when she was playful, but always made sure he was in the audience during her school performances. They had accepted him, even though they didn't know the complete truth yet. And that was what weighed heaviest on Amelia's chest. The fact that they didn't know that every day they grew closer to Gabriel, they also became more entangled in a story that hadn't been fully told. A story that belonged to them. She had tried to shield them from the pain, the complexity, the parts of the past she wished she could erase. But she was starting to understand that silence, however well-intentioned, could become its own form of harm. Later that day, when the dishes were clean and the girls were sprawled on the living room rug building a puzzle, Amelia called them over. Her voice was gentle, but serious enough that both girls turned immediately and sat up, sensing a shift. She didn't sit above them or across from them. She sat with them on the floor, legs crossed, the soft light highlighting the tenderness in her eyes. "I have something important I need to talk to you about," she began. She kept her voice calm, though her heart was hammering. The girls blinked at her, curious but unafraid. "It's about Gabriel," she said. "You've known him for a while now. You've spent time with him. You like him, don't you?" June nodded first, quick and certain. Ava tilted her head, considering for longer, then shrugged. "He's okay," she mumbled, but her tone betrayed affection. Amelia smiled faintly, then took a deep breath. "What I'm going to tell you might be surprising, but I think you're ready." And then she told them. Everything, not the painful details, not the betrayal or the silence or the years of surviving alone, but the truth they deserved. That Gabriel wasn't just some helpful guy, that he wasn't just a family friend. He was their father, their biological father, and that she had raised them alone, not because she wanted to keep them apart, but because, at the time, it had felt like the only safe, honest choice. The room grew very quiet. June was the first to speak. "He's our daddy?" Her voice was a whisper, not confused, but stunned. Amelia nodded. "Did he know about us?" Ava's question was deeper. Amelia met her eyes without looking away. "No, he didn't know. Not until recently." Ava looked down at her own hands. She was thinking, processing, retreating into that quiet, analytical part of herself that always surfaced when the world changed too fast. For the rest of the evening, the girls didn't say much more about it. Amelia didn't pressure them. She let the truth settle, let them absorb it in their own time. That night, she called Gabriel and told him what had happened. His voice was thick with emotion, barely audible. "I thought I would have to wait years for this moment," he said. "Thank you." He didn't rush to see them the next day. He respected their space, but when the girls were ready, truly ready, they made the decision themselves. One Saturday, Ava walked into the living room where Amelia and Gabriel were talking quietly and sat down next to him on the sofa without a word. She handed him a drawing they had made that morning, a portrait of their family, stick figures with large blue eyes. She had written names above each one: Mommy, Ava, June, and Gabriel. No title, no explanation. But it was enough. After that, June started calling him Daddy, without warning. She would say it casually, as if it had always been true. "Daddy, can you pass the milk? Daddy, can we watch a movie?" It took his breath away every time. Ava waited longer. For weeks, she referred to him only by name. But one day, when he picked her up from school and extended his hand, she took it and said softly, "Thank you, Daddy." It was the first time she had ever said it. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat had closed up, but he held her hand tighter and didn't let go. Part 7. The Sacrifice and the Ultimate Vow. Gabriel started to change in small but unmistakable ways. He still worked. He couldn't unmake the empire he had built. But now he did it differently, remotely, slower. He turned down meetings that required travel. He stepped away from high-profile interviews. His staff noticed. The media speculated. But Gabriel didn't care. For the first time, he had something more important than the next deal. He permanently moved into a modest house, just a few blocks away from Amelia's. Not to intrude, not to hover, but to be near. To be a part of the school mornings and music recitals, the weekend grocery runs, and the rainy day puzzles. He didn't try to make up for the time he had lost. He knew he couldn't, but he never missed a chance to be present again. Amelia watched him closely through all of this. At first, she remained cautious, waiting for him to falter. But the stumbles never came. This Gabriel was different. Not perfect, but real. She didn't let her heart rush ahead. She didn't forget what had happened. But she began to trust, to breathe easier, to lean on him in small ways, and to recognize that the man in front of her was no longer the one who had abandoned her 6 years earlier. He was a father now, and every day, without being asked, he was becoming something else too. A partner. The shift came suddenly, without warning, like a tremor across the surface of a calm sea. It started with a headache. Amelia ignored it at first, assuming stress or lack of sleep. She was juggling so much. Her growing publishing house, the girls' school projects, the emotional tightrope of this new chapter with Gabriel, the cautious unfurling of something fragile and real. It made sense to feel tired, but then the headaches became daily, sharper, more persistent. She started waking up nauseous, dizzy. One morning, while packing the girls' lunches, the room tilted violently and everything went black. She collapsed before hitting the floor. When she woke up, it was to the bright lights of a hospital room and the low, steady rhythm of machines beeping beside her. Gabriel was sitting in the corner, still in his coat, his face pale and exhausted, his hands clasped as if in prayer. He didn't notice she was awake at first. She studied him silently, the lines in his face deeper than usual. His shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world had finally settled on him. When he lifted his eyes and saw hers open, he exhaled as if he had been underwater for days. "You're awake?" he said hoarsely, getting up quickly, moving to her side. "Amelia, thank God." She blinked slowly at him. Her mouth was dry. Her voice barely came out. "What happened?" Gabriel hesitated, his jaw clenching. "You collapsed. We ran tests. You need rest. You are going to need treatment." He didn't say the word. Neither of them did. But it hung in the air like smoke. The diagnosis was serious, but not impossible. An autoimmune disorder, exacerbated by stress and exhaustion. Something that had been silently attacking her body for months, perhaps years. Doctors were optimistic with early treatment, but it would require time, rest, and consistency. Things Amelia had never allowed herself. The news shattered her, not just because she was scared, though she was, but because, for the first time in her life, she would have to let go. She couldn't do everything alone anymore. She couldn't pretend she was invincible. Gabriel didn't leave her side. He canceled everything. His meetings, his trips, even a merger that had taken months to organize. His assistant had never heard him sound so calm when he said, "My family comes first. Sort it out." He moved into the hospital with her, sleeping on the small sofa in the corner, waking every time she moved, learning her medication schedule better than the nurses. When she was too tired to eat, he coaxed her with warm soup. When her hands trembled, he held them. When she cried softly in the dark, he didn't say a word. He just wrapped her in his arms and held her. The girls visited every day. At first they were scared, unsure how to act, whispering when they spoke. But Gabriel turned the visits into something sacred. He brought games, painted their nails, told bedtime stories right there in the hospital room. Amelia watched it all with tears in her eyes. This man, who had once called her weak, now wiping jam from June's cheek and helping Ava with math homework on a whiteboard he borrowed from a nurse. One evening, after the girls had gone home with Amelia's cousin, and the machines beeped softly in the background, Amelia reached out and took Gabriel's hand. Her voice was weak but firm. "You are not the man I knew years ago." Gabriel didn't speak for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I wish I hadn't been him at all." Amelia turned her head to look at him. There was no blame in her eyes, just exhaustion and something deeper. Recognition. "People change," she said, "but most don't come back." "I almost didn't," he admitted. "I was so certain I didn't need anyone. I didn't understand what I was throwing away." "You were scared," she whispered. "I was too." He looked at her then, not like a man haunted by guilt, but like someone who finally chose to stay, even in the storm. "I'm still scared, but I'm not going anywhere." Part 8. The Summer and the Open Heart. The meaningful ending. A month passed, and with it came a sense of rhythm neither of them expected. Gabriel no longer felt like a visitor. He was no longer just the man who showed up with warm muffins or bedtime stories. He had become a constant. The girls began to talk about him as if he had always been there, asking if he would be at the school play, if he could come to the doctor's appointment, if he would teach them to swim this summer. They didn't ask permission to love him. They simply did. And Gabriel, who once thrived in sleek towers and tight schedules, now found himself humbled by 3 small hearts that opened to him without demand or condition. Amelia watched him closely throughout this time, no longer with suspicion, but with cautious awe. He bore no resemblance to the man she had walked away from. That man was driven, brilliant, and charming. Yes, but also distant, always 10 steps ahead of the moment they were in. This Gabriel knelt to tie shoelaces, carried extra juice boxes in his backpack just in case, and found himself laughing with the girls over a ridiculous drawing they had made of him wearing a crown. He didn't try to replace the years he had lost. He simply filled the ones unfolding before them. And it was in these moments, seeing the way her daughters trusted him, the way he spoke to them with kindness and not control, that Amelia began to feel the final pieces of the wall inside her begin to fall. That night, after the girls were finally asleep, sugar-buzzed and sun-tired, Gabriel and Amelia were alone in the small living room, the sound of the ocean in the distance. Amelia was sitting on the porch steps, wearing a sweater that had once been his, but somehow never made it back after a few extra cold nights. The fire pit crackled softly, illuminating Gabriel's face. He moved to sit beside her, not too close, but present. The silence between them shifted again, this time into something fragile and profound. After a long time, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was a delicate silver chain, matching the one she had worn all those years ago. The second half of a set, with a heart shaped to fit perfectly into hers. He opened his palm and offered it to her. "I had this made when I bought yours," he said, "but I never gave it to you. I thought I'd wait for the right moment." She looked at the pendant, then at him, her voice soft but steady. "And now? Now I don't wait anymore," he said. "Not for them, not for you. I know we can't go back. I don't want to. But I want to move forward with you, if you'll allow me. not as a perfect version of who we were, but as the people we are now. Imperfect, wiser, ready. Amelia held the pendant in her hand for a long time. It was warm from having been in his pocket, yet it felt like it had been waiting for her, too. She thought of all the nights she had clung to the original, wondering if it was foolish to keep it. And now, as the sea breeze moved softly through the trees and the firelight flickered on Gabriel's face, she finally allowed herself to believe in something she had buried long ago. She reached for his hand. "I'm ready," she said. He didn't say anything immediately. He simply closed his fingers around hers and sighed. The kind of sigh you only take when something heavy has finally been laid down. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet, common, and real. The next morning, the girls woke up to find their parents having coffee on the porch, sitting close, laughing about something only they understood. And in that small moment, with the ocean humming nearby and a day full of sandcastles ahead, they felt what they had missed for so long. Not just love, but home. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for the final part and like this video if you enjoyed the story. Come back next week to discuss what Amelia's health crisis means for their future and the next big chapter for the Sterling family.